Sarah Whitfield's childhood was painted with wide horizons. Oklahoma was a place where the sky felt larger than life, a dome of endless blue by day and a velvet tapestry of stars at night. The Whitfield farm sat a few miles outside of town, surrounded by wheat fields that swayed like golden oceans whenever the wind came sweeping down the plains. To most kids in her high school, it was a boring place, the kind of town people dreamed of escaping. But to Sarah, it was a classroom one that taught her patience, stillness, and focus. Her father, John Whitfield, was a quiet man with weathered hands and a deep respect for tradition. He wasn't a hunter for sport as much as for necessity. The family's freezer was often filled with venison or rabbit, meat that kept them fed. Through the leaner months, he owned an old bolt-action hunting rifle, a relic passed down from his own father, its wooden stock scarred and worn smooth from years of use. To John, it was a tool. To Sarah, it was something else entirely. She first held that rifle when she was 10. Her father had taken her out to the edge of the property, where rusted oil drums and empty soda cans sat stacked like improvised targets. He showed her how to check the chamber, how to rest the rifle in the crook of her shoulder, how to breathe before squeezing the trigger. Sarah didn't giggle nervously like most kids might. She didn't jerk the trigger or flinch at the sound. She listened carefully, adjusted, and tried again. The first time she hit a can, it spun off the post and clattered into the dirt. Her father looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Well, would you look at that?" he muttered, trying to hide his surprise. Beginner's luck. But luck didn't explain what happened next. Sarah hit another, and another. Soon she was lining up her shots with an intensity that made her father step back and simply watch. She didn't care about noise or recoil. She cared about the rhythm. Slow breath in, steady exhale, heartbeat in her ears. The rifle became an extension of her hands, and each shot was like an answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. By the time they packed up, she was grinning ear to ear. That night, she could barely sleep, replaying the sound of metal pinging and the feeling of the rifle settling into her shoulder. From then on, shooting became her secret sanctuary. While her classmates were absorbed in social dramas, dances, and the endless churn of teenage gossip, Sarah preferred the solitude of the open field. She'd set up makeshift targets, sometimes paper plates pinned to wooden posts, sometimes old bottles fished out of recycling bins. She wasn't competing with anyone. She was chasing perfection. Her mother worried at first. "You're spending too much time out there," she'd say, watching her daughter march across the fields with a rifle slung across her back. But her father defended her. "She's learning discipline," he insisted. "Better she spends her time aiming at cans than hanging around town getting into trouble." Still, not everyone understood. In school, when kids asked what she did for fun, Sarah's answer often drew laughter. "Shooting? Like hunting deer? What are you, Annie Oakley?" They called her farm girl sharpshooter in a mocking tone, rolling their eyes as if her hobby was outdated and ridiculous. Sarah didn't rise to their teasing. She wasn't aiming to impress them. Her targets weren't about showing off. They were about control. In a world where teenagers felt tossed around by hormones, expectations, and the looming question of their futures, Sarah found her calm in the crack of a rifle. It wasn't violence she admired. It was precision. One autumn evening, when the wheat fields had turned a rich gold and the air was sharp with the smell of harvest, Sarah's father took her hunting for the first time. The woods were silent, save for the rustle of leaves. Hours passed as they waited. Sarah didn't complain. Once, she stayed still, her eyes scanning the trees. When a deer finally stepped into view, her father nodded to her. Her heart raced. She steadied her breath the way she always had, let the world narrow to her scope, and pulled the trigger. The deer fell instantly, clean and humane. Her father clapped her on the shoulder, pride and awe mixed in his eyes. "You're a natural," he said quietly. Sarah didn't beam or brag. She only nodded. She had proven something not to her father, not to her classmates, but to herself. By the time she reached her senior year, Sarah was known in her community as the girl who could outshoot most of the local men. At county fairs and small-town events, there were sometimes shooting competitions for fun. Sarah never lost. Some competitors smiled politely, offering backhanded compliments, while others walked away shaking their heads, muttering about lucky shots. But Sarah knew better. She knew luck didn't string together 10 bullseyes in a row. She knew luck didn't steady your breath in the freezing cold or keep your hands from shaking after hours of waiting. That was training. That was focus. That was her. Yet even as her skill grew, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Shooting cans and hunting deer wasn't enough. She wanted something more meaningful, something that tested her beyond the boundaries of her small town. She wanted to see if her discipline, her patience, her ability to control chaos could matter on a larger stage. One night, sitting on the porch with her father as the sun dipped below the horizon, she finally spoke her thoughts aloud. "Dad," she began, hesitating, "what if I joined the army?" Her father nearly dropped his coffee. "The army? Sarah, that's no small thing to say. You've got college options. You could stay here, help with the farm, even work at the diner if you want. Why the army?" She looked out at the darkening fields, the crickets starting their nightly chorus. "Because I don't just want to shoot at cans. I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to serve. I want to matter." Her father didn't answer right away. He studied her face, saw the determination in her eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "If that's truly what you want, then I'll stand behind you. But Sarah," he paused, "don't do it to prove anything to anyone. Do it because it's who you are." Sarah smiled faintly. "That's the only reason I'd ever do it." The next week, she walked into the recruiter's office. Her classmates stared when they heard the news. Some laughed. Sarah Whitfield? Army? What, is she going to bring her old farm rifle to the battlefield? The jokes echoed, cruel but expected. Sarah didn't bother defending herself. She simply signed her paperwork, shook the recruiter's hand, and walked out. As she stood outside that day, the Oklahoma wind tugging at her hair, Sarah felt something she had never felt before: clarity. She didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know what battles awaited her. But she knew this her journey was just beginning. The girl who grew up in the silence of the fields was stepping into a world of chaos. And though they laughed at her rifle, Sarah Whitfield was ready to prove first to herself, then to everyone else, that she had been preparing for this her entire life. The news spread through the halls of Sarah's high school like wildfire. Sarah Whitfield, the quiet girl from the edge of town, had enlisted in the army. Her classmates didn't believe it at first. Sarah wasn't the type who joined the military. She wasn't the loud, athletic cheerleader desperate to leave, nor was she the football star hoping for glory beyond the county lines. She was the girl who sat in the back of the classroom, neat handwriting in her notebooks, quiet eyes that always seemed to be focused on something far beyond the walls. When she confirmed it herself, some kids laughed. Sarah Whitfield, soldier? What's she going to do? Hunt squirrels for the army. One boy sneered, earning chuckles from his friends. Another chimed in, bet she bring that old rifle of hers. Hope the enemy likes antiques. Sarah didn't rise to their bait. She never did. She had long ago learned that words could sting only if she let them. Instead, she carried the weight of her decision with quiet resolve. Her mother, Margaret, was shaken when Sarah broke the news at the dinner table. The army? Sarah, are you sure? That's not a small commitment. I know, Sarah replied simply. She set down her fork and folded her hands together. But I want to do this. I need to do this. I don't just want to stay here, Mom. I don't want a safe life behind the counter at the diner or stuck on the farm. I want to serve, to be part of something bigger than me. Her mother looked at her husband for support, but John Whitfield only sighed and rubbed his jaw. He'd seen it coming. That spark in Sarah's eyes every time she talked about testing herself had grown brighter over the years. If this is truly what you want, Sarah, then I won't stop you, John finally said. But you'll need to be ready. The army won't be like the fields. You'll be tested in ways you've never imagined. Sarah nodded. That's what I want. The day she left for basic training, the town gathered at the small bus station. A few waved politely, others whispered. Sarah stood tall, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, the Oklahoma wind tugging at her hair. She caught the eye of a few classmates lingering at the edge of the crowd. One of them smirked and made a mock salute. Sarah ignored him and stepped onto the bus. As the engine roared to life and the town faded from view, she felt a thrill in her chest. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just dreaming of something bigger, she was chasing it. Basic training was a world away from the plains. From the moment Sarah stepped off the transport bus, she was swallowed by the roar of drill sergeants barking orders, the clatter of boots against concrete, and the electric energy of hundreds of recruits being whipped into soldiers. Move it, move it, move it, a voice thundered as she scrambled to grab her gear. The days blurred into an endless grind of early mornings, punishing runs, blistered hands, and shouted corrections. Sleep came in snatches, meals in hurried bites. Recruits collapsed onto their bunks at night, with muscles screaming, only to be yanked awake before dawn for another round. For many, the shock broke them. Some quit within the first week. Others grumbled and complained, their spirits worn down by the constant pressure. But Sarah endured. She wasn't the fastest runner, nor the strongest lifter, but she was steady. When others cursed under their breath, she focused. When others faltered, she leaned into the discipline she had honed back home. Patience, breath, rhythm. The farm. Girl who had once sat quietly in the fields, now carried that same quiet into the barracks. Still, her silence made her stand out, and her battered rifle case brought with her only as a keepsake, until Army-issue weapons were assigned, became an easy target for ridicule. What the hell is that thing? One recruit snorted the first time he saw it. Looks like it belongs in a museum. Another laughed. Careful, boys, she might load it with silver bullets and hunt werewolves. The laughter spread, good-natured to some, crueler from others. Sarah kept her face neutral, but inside, the sting was real. Not because she cared what they thought of her rifle, but because she knew what it represented, the skills she had built, the discipline she carried with her. To them, it was just a joke. To her, it was her foundation. She never defended herself, never explained. She let the laughter pass. Instead, she threw herself into the work. In drills, she moved with precision. In marshes, she kept her pace steady. When assigned cleaning duty, she worked without complaint. Slowly, grudgingly, some began to notice. One evening, as the recruits scrubbed mud from their boots, a fellow trainee named Martinez sat beside her. "You don't talk much, Whitfield?" Sarah shrugged. "Not much to say." Martinez grinned. "People think you're weird. Quiet. Always watching. But I think you're tougher than most of us. You don't let the crap get to you." Sarah glanced at him, surprised. It was the first time someone had voiced respect. She didn't smile, but her silence was softer now, less defensive. "Maybe," she said. "I'm just here to learn." The defining moment came at the firing range. Recruits lined up, weapons at the ready. The air buzzed with nerves and bravado. Some boasted loudly, claiming they'd hit bullseyes without breaking a sweat. Sarah kept to herself, adjusting her stance, remembering her father's lessons. "Bet farm girl here misses every shot," someone muttered behind her. Sarah ignored it. She inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and took her first shot. The target snapped. Bullseye. She fired again. Another bullseye. And again. By the end of the drill, her paper target was nearly perfect. The instructors raised their eyebrows, exchanging impressed glances. The chatter behind her died into silence. For the first time, Sarah felt the shift. The laughter wasn't gone, but it was quieter now, tinged with something new. Doubt. Maybe the quiet farm girl wasn't a joke after all. That night, lying in her bunk, Sarah stared at the ceiling. The barracks buzzed with murmured conversations, but she barely heard them. Her body ached, her hands raw, but her mind was clear. She wasn't here to prove herself to the recruits who laughed. She wasn't here to cling to old rifles or to chase validation. She was here because she had chosen to be. Because she wanted to find out how far discipline, patience, and courage could carry her. Outside, the night was thick with crickets and distant hums of generators. Sarah closed her eyes and thought of home, the golden fields, the sound of cans. Spinning off posts, her father's steady voice. They laughed at her rifle. They doubted her place here. But Sarah Whitfield had stepped onto a path that was hers alone. And deep down, she knew she was only beginning to show the world what she was capable of. The morning of weapons qualification dawned gray and heavy. Clouds smothered the sunrise, casting the base in a dull haze that matched the tension in the air. Recruits moved stiffly, rubbing their eyes, checking their gear, whispering nervously about what lay ahead. For many, today would be decisive. Weapons qualification wasn't just another drill. It determined whether a recruit could be trusted with a rifle in combat, whether they were soldier material. Fail, and the shame stuck. Pass, and you proved yourself. Sarah adjusted her helmet and marched in line with the others, her boots crunching against the gravel. She kept her eyes forward, but she could hear the mutters behind her. Farm girls. Gonna choke today? Bet she's all talk well. No talk, really. Just weird stares. She's probably never fired anything bigger than that antique she dragged in. The words weren't new. Sarah had grown used to the smirks and sneers. But today, something was different. Today, she would finally answer them, not with words, but with steel and powder, and the cold certainty of her skill. The firing range stretched out before them, rows of targets lined up like silent judges. The instructors barked orders, their voices slicing through the morning air. Listen up. You've got one chance to prove yourselves today. This is live fire, this is qualification, and this is not the time to be sloppy. Do you understand? Yes, drill sergeant. The recruits roared back in unison. Sarah settled into her lane, the rifle in her hands unfamiliar but functional. It wasn't her father's old bolt action. This was the Army's weapon, now sleek, standard, unforgiving. She ran her hands over it, feeling its weight, its balance. It was different, yes, but the fundamentals were the same. The instructor paced behind the line. Targets will appear at different ranges: 50 meters, 100, 200, 300. Some pop up fast, some slow. You hit, you move on. You miss, you make it up quick. Fail too many, and you're done. Recruits nodded nervously. Some cracked jokes to mask the fear. Others whispered prayers. Sarah said nothing. She only breathed. The first round of shooters stepped up. One by one, rifles cracked, brass casings rattled, targets jumped or stayed standing. The instructors kept notes on clipboards, calling out scores. Some recruits cursed under their breath when they missed. Others grinned proudly when they hit. When Sarah's turn came, she moved forward without hesitation. She lay flat on her stomach, her cheek pressed against the stock. Her breathing slowed, the chaos around her fading into a muffled background. She could hear her heartbeat, steady and calm. "Shooter ready?" The instructor barked. Sarah nodded once. "Fire!" The first target popped up at 50 meters. Sarah's finger squeezed gently. The target dropped. Another popped at 100. Drop. 200. Drop. 300. Drop. Her rifle moved with a rhythm, a steady dance of aim and release. She didn't rush. She didn't second-guess. Each shot was deliberate, controlled. The chatter behind her died into silence as the targets kept falling, one after another. By the time the drill ended, her score sheet was nearly flawless. The instructor stared at the paper, then at Sarah. "You ever shot before, Whitfield?" "Yes, drill sergeant." "Where?" "Oklahoma, drill sergeant." "Cans and deer." The man raised an eyebrow. "Well, whatever you did out there, keep doing it." He scribbled something on his clipboard and moved on, but the faint smile tugging at his mouth told the story. Behind her, the recruits shifted uneasily. Some muttered excuses, others stared openly. The jokes about farm rifles didn't come this time. Martinez, the one who had spoken kindly to her before, leaned over as she gathered her gear. "Damn, Whitfield," he whispered, grinning. "You made that look easy." Sarah shrugged. "It wasn't." "Still," Martinez chuckled. "You just shut up half the barracks." That evening, the barracks buzzed with talk of the range. Some still tried to downplay it. "Probably just luck," one recruit said, shaking his head. "Anyone can have a good day." "Yeah, well, she had a perfect day," Martinez countered. "Luck doesn't do that." Sarah sat quietly on her bunk, cleaning her rifle piece. By piece. She didn't join the arguments. She didn't need to. A sound of metal snapping into place, the smooth slide of oiled parts, this was enough. Her work spoke for itself. Yet, in the silence of her own thoughts, she allowed herself a small smile. She had proven what she always knew. Her skill was real, transferable, and uncheckable, even under scrutiny. But she also knew this was just the beginning. A rifle range on a training ground was controlled, predictable. Out there, beyond these fences, would be anything but. The weeks that followed only sharpened her edge. Instructors began to notice her steadiness, assigning her extra drills, sometimes pairing her with less skilled recruits as a model. She didn't like the attention, but she accepted the responsibility. One day, during a timed exercise, an instructor watched her hit every moving target without missing a beat. "Whitfield," he said afterward, "you've got ice in your veins. Don't waste it." The comment spread quickly among the recruits. Some began to respect her, grudgingly at first, then more openly. Others still clung to their pride, unwilling to admit the quiet farm girl might be better than them. The teasing didn't stop entirely, but it softened. It no longer carried the sting of superiority. It sounded more like nerves, like they laughed, because they didn't know what else to do when faced with someone who had shattered their assumptions. One night, as lights out neared, Martinez sat across from her again. "You know, Whitfield," he said, leaning back on his bunk, "I think you scared some people today." Sarah looked up from her rifle, eyebrow raised. "Scared?" "Yeah. Most of us came in here thinking we'd all be equal, you know. Start. Fresh. None of that hometown stuff mattered. But then you go and shoot like that, and suddenly people realize some of us are just better prepared. Makes them nervous." Sarah considered this, then nodded. "Maybe, but nerves don't matter. Out there, what matters is whether you can hit when it counts." Martinez grinned, spoken like someone who knows she'll hit. She didn't answer. She just kept cleaning her rifle, the faintest glimmer of a smile tugging at her lips. By the time qualification week ended, Sarah's name was etched on the instructor's notes as one of the top shooters in her class. She didn't seek recognition, but it followed her nonetheless. The farm girl from Oklahoma, the one they mocked for her old rifle, had become the standard to beat. And though Sarah never said it aloud, she carried the knowledge with her like a quiet fire. She was ready. Ready for whatever came next. The field had tested her. The army had tested her. And both had revealed the same truth: Sarah Whitfield was no joke. She was a marksman, a soldier. And one day she knew her skill would matter in ways even she couldn't yet imagine. The C-17 cargo plane rattled as it descended, its engines groaning under the strain of the hot desert air. Sarah sat strapped into a jump seat along the side wall, helmet tilted forward, her duffel wedged between her boots. The hum of the engines drowned out most conversation, but the nervous energy of her fellow soldiers needed no words. Everyone felt it. The training ground was behind them now. Afghanistan lay ahead. When the ramp lowered, heat hit like a wall. It wasn't the dry warmth of Oklahoma summers. This was oppressive, suffocating an oven wrapped in sand and dust. The horizon shimmered, endless mountains clawing at the sky, while villages crouched in the valleys like secrets half buried in stone. Sarah blinked against the brightness as they marched toward the waiting vehicles. Dust rose with every step, coating her lips, her skin, even the inside of her lungs. She had imagined this moment so many times back home, but reality was harsher, heavier. She wasn't nervous exactly, more alert, her senses prickling. This wasn't the range. This was real. Their forward operating base was a sprawling compound of concrete barriers, tents, and prefabricated huts surrounded by walls of HESCO barriers stacked high with dirt. The air smelled of diesel fuel and sweat, a constant drone of generators filling the silence between bursts of radio chatter. Sarah's squad lived in a cramped tent lined with rows of cots. The canvas walls flapped at night, the air thick and restless. She shared the space with 9 other soldiers, most of them men, all seasoned enough to wear their confidence like armor. Martinez, her friend from Basic, stuck close, offering her a grin as they unpacked. "Well, Whitfield," he said, "welcome to paradise." Sarah glanced around at the bare cots, the weapons stacked in the corner, the dust already creeping. And under the flaps, paradise, huh? Okay, maybe more like the armpit of the world, Martinez corrected with a chuckle. Despite his humor, the weight of where they were pressed down on them all. Every soldier knew the stories. Patrols ambushed, convoys hit by IEDs, snipers hiding in ridges. Out here, the enemy wasn't paper targets or timed drills. Out here, the enemy watched, waited, and struck without warning. The first patrol came. 2 days later, they loaded into armored Humvees, weapons checked and rechecked, body armor heavy on their shoulders. The convoy rumbled out through the gates, tires grinding against gravel. Beyond the walls, Afghanistan stretched out villages, built of mud brick, goats herded by children with wary eyes, mountains carved sharp against the horizon. Sarah sat in the back, rifle across her lap. She scanned rooftops, windows, ridge lines. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every flash of glass a possible scope. Her training told her to focus, to breathe, to trust her instincts. But instincts had never been tested under the weight of reality. They rolled into a village where children waved half-heartedly as the convoy passed. Women watched from doorways, faces hidden behind scarves. Men stood still, silent, their expressions unreadable. The squad leader, Sergeant Miller, ordered them out on foot patrol. "Eyes up," he barked, "stay sharp." Sarah fell into formation, boots crunching on gravel streets. The heat radiated off the walls, the air thick with dust. Sweat dripped. Down her back, her helmet pressing like a vice against her forehead. She breathed steadily, scanning every angle, her rifle steady in her hands. No shots were fired that day. No ambush, no sniper. Just the endless tension of waiting for something to happen. By the time they returned to base, Sarah felt drained not from combat, but from the constant vigilance. That night, the squad gathered in the tent, boots off, ears stacked by their cots. The men swapped stories, joking to cut the edge of nerves. Sarah sat quietly, polishing her rifle. Farm girls still silent. One of the soldiers, Corporal Jenkins, muttered with a smirk. "Hey, Whitfield, you planning to talk to us any time soon? Or just stare at that gun of yours?" A few laughed. Martinez cut in. "Leave her alone." "Jenkins, she's focused. That's more than I can say for you when you missed that corner today." The laughter shifted, now at Jenkins's expense. He glared but said nothing. Sarah gave Martinez a grateful glance. She didn't mind being underestimated. She'd been underestimated all her life. But here, in this place where lives depended on each other, she knew silence wasn't enough. At some point, she would need to show them who she was, not with words, but with action. The days turned into weeks. The rhythm of deployment set in. Patrols through villages, nights on guard duty, briefings filled with grainy drone footage and intelligence reports. Sometimes, nothing happened for days. Other times, chaos erupted in seconds, a roadside bomb shaking the ground, gunfire echoing off the mountains. Sarah moved through it with the same calm she had honed back home. She wasn't reckless, but she wasn't frozen either. She followed orders, kept her weapon steady, her eyes sharp. Slowly, her squad began to notice. During one patrol, a sudden burst of gunfire cracked from a nearby hillside. The squad dove for cover. Sarah dropped behind a low wall, scanning through her scope. "Can you see anything?" Sergeant Miller demanded. Sarah didn't answer right. Away, she adjusted, steadied her breath, and spotted the faint muzzle flash between rocks. "There," she said finally, pointing. Miller followed her direction and unleashed suppressive fire, forcing the enemy back. The squad regrouped and pulled out without casualties. Later, Miller approached her. "Good eyes, Whitfield. Keep it up." It was a small acknowledgement, but it meant everything. Respect in the army wasn't handed out, it was earned inch by inch, action by action. Still, doubts lingered. Around the fire pit one evening, Jenkins muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Spotting flashes is one thing. Pulling the trigger under pressure is another. Targets don't shoot back. We'll see what she does when it's real." Sarah didn't rise to it. She simply cleaned her rifle and let the words pass. But deep down, she knew he wasn't entirely wrong. She had proven herself in training, proven her eyes were sharp in the field. But she hadn't yet faced the moment where everything balanced on her aim, her breath, her trigger finger. That moment, she suspected, was coming. And when it came, there would be no do-overs, no excuses. Only the shot that mattered, or the one that didn't. For now, she lay in her cot at night, the desert wind rattling the canvas walls, stars flickering through gaps in the fabric. She thought of Oklahoma, a field swaying gently under an endless sky. She thought of her father's voice. "Do it because it's who you are." Here, in the dust and danger of Afghanistan, Sarah Whitfield was finding out exactly who she was. A soldier, a marksman, a woman whose silence wasn't weakness, but focus. And though her squad respected her more with each passing day, some still doubted. They laughed once at her rifle, and they might laugh again. But Sarah knew the truth. Sooner or later, the war would test her. Sooner or later, she would face the shot that defined everything. And when that moment arrived, she would be ready. The morning patrol began like any other sun blazing, dust thick, nerves steady but taut. Sarah walked near the rear of the formation, her rifle cradled in her arms, scanning rooftops and ridgelines. The squad moved through a dry riverbed at that, cut between jagged cliffs, the rocks rising like broken teeth on either side. Sergeant Miller's voice carried through the radio. "Stay alert. Terrain's tight here. Watch those ridges." Sarah's eyes traced the slopes. Loose rock, shadows pooling in cracks, occasional flashes of light from shards of quartz. Everything looked ordinary, yet her instincts hummed with unease. The riverbed felt like a funnel, narrow, exposed, the perfect place for an ambush. The first shot cracked the air like a whip. Contact! Someone yelled as the bullet ricocheted off a boulder near Martinez. The squad dove for cover, boots sliding in dust, helmets clattering against stone. Sarah dropped flat, pressing against the riverbed wall. The gunfire stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. No follow-up, no spray, just silence. Then another shot rang out. This one closer. It slammed into the dirt near Jenkins, spraying grit across his face. He cursed and scrambled deeper into cover. "Sniper!" Miller barked. His voice was sharp, clipped, commanding, but Sarah could hear the edge of tension in it. The squad froze, each soldier pinned by the unseen enemy above. The sniper didn't fire recklessly. He fired with patience, precision. Each shot forced movement, punished mistakes. Whoever he was, he knew what he was doing. "Can anyone see him?" Miller demanded. "I got nothing," Jenkins muttered, eyes darting nervously. "Me neither," another soldier said. "He's too well hidden." Sarah pressed her cheek against the rough stone, peering through her scope. The ridges stretched high, dotted with boulders and scraggly brush. Somewhere, up there, glass was glinting, a rifle was pointed down, and one man was controlling the fate of 10. Her heart thudded, but her breathing stayed calm. She knew this game. She had played it before, on different fields, patience against movement, stillness against panic. Only now, the stakes were lives, not tin cans. Another shot cracked. This. One smashed into the side of the Humvee, parked behind them. Sparks burst. The squad flinched. "Damn it, he's boxing us in," Miller growled. "We can't move. Not unless we know where he is." Silence again. The sniper wasn't rushing. He was waiting, watching, ready to pick off anyone who dared to stand. Fear coiled tight in the riverbed. The men muttered to each other, trying to stay calm, but their eyes gave them away. Wide, darting, desperate. Sarah saw it in Jenkins most. Of all the bravado stripped from him, replaced with trembling hands. "Sergeant," Jenkins whispered, "what if we can't find him? What if he just keeps us here until backup comes?" Miller's jaw tightened. "That's not an option." Sarah shifted slightly, inching her scope higher. She studied the ridgeline, searching not for movement, but for stillness, something out of place, something too deliberate in a landscape of chaos. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't just look. See." Minutes dragged like hours. Sweat trickled into Sarah's eyes. Dust clung to her lips. The sniper remained unseen, untouchable, yet his presence was suffocating. Every soldier in the squad knew that one wrong move could be their last. Martinez crawled beside her, his face pale but determined. "You see anything, Whitfield?" "Not yet," she murmured. "Well, hurry," he whispered, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't feel like being target practice today." Sarah exhaled slowly, scanning again. She thought back to the range, to the county fair, to the hours of stillness in fields waiting for deer to appear. Her gift had never been quick reflexes. It had been patience, the ability to notice details others missed. And then she saw it. A faint flash, almost imperceptible, tucked between two jagged rocks high on the ridge. Not sunlight on quartz, this. Time. Glass. The sniper's scope. Her pulse quickened, but she steadied it. She couldn't just call it out blindly. If she was wrong, she'd send her squad into more danger. If she was right, she needed to be precise. She whispered to Martinez, 2 o'clock. Top of the ridge, between the rocks. He followed her direction, squinting through his own scope. After a moment, his eyes widened. Holy hell. You're right. He tapped his radio. Sergeant. Whitfield's got eyes on him. 2 o'clock, high ridge, between rocks. Miller whipped his head toward Sarah. His face was hard, skeptical. You sure? Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, Sergeant. I'm sure. Miller studied her a moment longer, then nodded. All right. Mark it. Suppressive fire ripped from the squad, chewing into the ridge where Sarah pointed. Dust and stone burst into the air. The sniper didn't fire back. For the first time, the silence worked in their favor. But Sarah knew the truth. The sniper wasn't gone. He was waiting. He was patient too. The firing stopped. The squad held their breath, eyes glued to the ridge. Then another shot cracked. This one angled perfectly to ricochet off a wall and rained fragments over the squad's position. The man wasn't just skilled. He was clever. Damn it, Miller cursed. He's still there. And he's better than we thought. Sarah's hands clenched around her rifle. The fear that gripped the squad pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. But deep inside, beneath the fear, was something else. A calm certainty, as if all her life had been leading her to this standoff. The sniper thought he controlled the field. He thought he held all the power. Sarah Whitfield wasn't about to let him keep it. Pinned in the dust of that riverbed, Sarah's world narrowed to two things: the ridge above and the steady rhythm of her own breath. She didn't know how, not yet, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. If the squad was going to escape alive, it would be her shot that made the difference. And when that moment came, she wouldn't miss. The squad had been pinned for nearly 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. The riverbed was still, eerily quiet, except for the occasional clink of shifting gear and the labored breathing of men pressed against stone. Heat radiated off the cliffs, baking them under the relentless Afghan sun. Every soldier knew it. The sniper had them trapped. Sergeant Miller crouched behind a boulder, radio pressed to his ear, muttering with command. His jaw was tight, his voice clipped. We're taking sniper fire. Grid 4-7. Can't advance. Can't retreat. Requesting air support. The radio hissed with static. Finally, a voice crackled back. Copy. Air assets tied up. Closest bird is 30 minutes out. You're on your own until then. Miller cursed under his breath and slammed the radio against his knee. 30 minutes was a lifetime under the eye of a sniper. Jenkins shifted nervously beside Sarah, wiping sweat from his brow. We're sitting ducks. He's just toying with us. Martinez snapped. Shut it, Jenkins. Panicking won't help. Panicking? Jenkins hissed. We're boxed in. He's got the high ground. He's got the range, and we can't even peek without getting shot. Tell me again how we're not screwed. Sarah said nothing. She was still staring at the ridge, at that narrow slit between the rocks, where she'd seen the faint flash. Her gut told her the sniper was still there, hidden in perfect cover, watching, waiting. Her squad was right about one thing. He was better than most. Every shot he fired had been controlled, deliberate. Not wild bursts, not wasted bullets. He wasn't trying to scare them. He was hunting them. And unless someone stopped him, he would succeed. Miller crouched low, frustration etched on his face. We'll wait him out. He'll have to move eventually. But Sarah knew better. Snipers didn't move unless forced. A professional could lie still for hours, days even, sustained by patience alone. They weren't waiting him out. They were waiting to be picked off. The squad's nerves frayed with every passing second. Jenkins muttered curses, his hands trembling. Another soldier, Carter, tried to keep steady, but Sarah saw the twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes kept flicking up toward the ridge, as if expecting the bullet meant for him. Fear spread like wildfire, and fear got soldiers killed. Sarah steadied. Her breathing pressed her cheek against her rifle and peered through her scope again. The ridgeline blurred in waves of heat, rocks shifting like mirages. She adjusted, focused, and caught it again, the faint shimmer of glass. It wasn't a clear target, but it was enough. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "I can take the shot." Martinez turned toward her, eyebrows raised. "What did you say?" She kept her eyes on the scope. "I can take him." Jenkins barked a bitter laugh. "Oh, great. Now the farm girl thinks she's Annie Oakley. You miss, he kills us all." Sarah didn't flinch. "If I don't try, he kills us anyway." Miller looked at her sharply. For a moment, silence pressed down on the squad. The idea hung in the air, heavy, almost unthinkable. Letting a 21-year-old specialist, barely a year out of basic, take the one shot that could decide whether they lived or died. Miller shook his head. "Negative. Too risky. We'll hold until support arrives." Sarah's jaw tightened. She understood his hesitation. Leadership meant protecting lives, not gambling them on long shots. But this wasn't hesitation's battlefield. It was the snipers. Every minute they waited, the odds tilted further against them. She shifted, locking eyes with her sergeant. "With respect, sir, waiting is the risk. He's not going to. Let us sit here. He's testing us, playing with us. The longer we stay pinned, the more likely one of us makes a mistake." Miller didn't respond immediately. He studied her, his gaze searching for doubt. But he found none. Sarah's face was calm, her hands steady, her voice firm. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. "You're certain you've got him?" Sarah nodded once. "I'm certain." The squad stirred uneasily. Some exchanged nervous glances. Jenkins muttered, "This is insane. She misses. We're dead." Martinez leaned closer to him, his voice sharp. "And what's your plan, genius? Sit here and pray he runs out of bullets?" The tension thickened, but beneath it, something shifted. A flicker of hope, faint but real. Sarah adjusted her scope again, tracking the narrow opening between rocks. She didn't see the sniper's face. She didn't see his rifle. All she saw was the glass shimmer, faint but steady. A ghost in the mirage, but she didn't need his face. She only needed his position. She remembered her father's words. "Patience, Sarah. Precision. Don't think about the shot. Think about the moment before it." The memory steadied her. Sarah inhaled deeply, then spoke quietly but clearly. "Sergeant, with your permission, I'll end this." Miller hesitated only a second longer. Then he gave a short nod. "Do it." Time slowed. Sarah adjusted her body against the rock, finding the angle, aligning her scope with the faint shimmer. Around her, the squad fell into silence. No one breathed too loud. No one dared move. All eyes turned to her. The weight of it pressed heavy on her shoulders. Not the weight of doubt, but the weight of responsibility. 10 lives hung on her trigger. Pull. 10 lives, including her own. And yet she felt no panic. Only focus. She whispered to Martinez without looking away. "Cover me. If I miss, you'll need to fire on my mark." Martinez's voice was steady. "You won't miss." She adjusted once more. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger. Her breath slowed. Her heart steadied. The sniper was out there, watching through his own scope, certain he held them in his grasp. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he was facing the one soldier who had trained her whole life for this exact kind of moment. Sarah Whitfield, the girl they had once laughed at. And now, with the world narrowed to the space between two rocks, she was ready to prove them all wrong. The ridgeline shimmered in her sight, heat waves bending the world. Sarah exhaled, steady, calm, and began to squeeze the trigger. Sarah's finger pressed gently against the trigger, her breathing slow, deliberate. The world shrank to the narrow crack between two jagged rocks high on the ridge. Heat shimmered across her vision, distorting the air like ripples in water. She ignored it. She ignored everything. The weight of the rifle against her shoulder felt familiar, comforting. It wasn't just metal and wood anymore. It was an extension of her will. Her pulse slowed, the sounds of her squad fading until all she could hear was the quiet rhythm of her own breath. In, hold, out. The sniper up there thought he had them trapped. He thought patience belonged only to him. But Sarah had learned patience in endless fields and quiet woods. She had lived patience long before she ever wore a uniform. And now patience would end him. "Take it, Whitfield," Martinez whispered beside her, his voice low but steady. She didn't answer. Words would only break her focus. Instead, she centered the crosshairs over the faint shimmer of glass. It was barely visible, the smallest imperfection in the ridgeline, but she trusted it. She knew it was him. The wind whispered across the valley, tugging at her hair. She calculated its pull instinctively, adjusting the angle. Distance? Long, but not impossible. Elevation? Tricky, but manageable. Her finger curled, the pad pressing down, and then she squeezed. The rifle cracked, its report thunderous in the confined riverbed. Dust leapt from the muzzle. The recoil kicked against her shoulder, but Sarah absorbed it smoothly, never flinching, never blinking. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The world froze, suspended between life and death. Then movement. High on the ridge, the shimmer jerked violently. A dark figure tumbled backward out of the rocks, arms flailing for the briefest instant before, vanishing into the dust below. The squad gasped in unison. Jenkins swore under his breath. Martinez's jaw dropped. Silence followed, pure, heavy silence. No follow-up shot, no ricochet, no bullet snapping past their heads. Only stillness. Sarah lowered her rifle slowly, her eyes never leaving the ridge. She had done it. The impossible shot. Miller was the first to break the silence. "Holy damn." His voice was low, almost reverent. Jenkins sputtered. That's not possible." She couldn't have how the hell, but no one answered him. They didn't need to. The truth was lying somewhere up on that ridge, still and silent. Martinez grinned, clapping Sarah on the shoulder. "I told you she wouldn't miss." Sarah didn't smile. Her face remained calm, composed, but her heart thudded in her chest. She had expected the shot to land. She knew it would, but the reality of what she'd done was only just sinking in. She had taken out a sniper. Not in training, not on a range, but in combat, under fire, with lives hanging on her aim. And she had won. The squad stirred, energy returning like a current, surging back into a dead wire. Soldiers shifted, stretched, peeked cautiously over cover. No shots greeted them. "Clear?" Carter asked uncertainly. "Clear," Miller confirmed, his eyes still locked on Sarah. She met his gaze evenly. No words passed between them, but the meaning was clear. She had earned something in that moment, something far heavier than just approval. Respect. They regrouped quickly, moving with renewed purpose. Miller sent 2 soldiers to climb the ridge and confirm the kill. The rest secured the riverbed, watching angles, though the tension had broken. Minutes later, the scouts returned, breathless. Target down. Confirmed sniper. He's not getting up. The word spread through the squad like wildfire. Shoulders sagged in relief. Laughter bubbled nervously from Jenkins, almost hysterical. Martinez whooped under his breath. Even Carter cracked a grin. Sarah simply nodded. She didn't need celebration. The result spoke louder than any cheer. As they prepared to move out, Miller approached her quietly. He stood close, his expression hard, but no longer skeptical. Instead, there was something new in his eyes, pride, maybe, or awe. "You just saved every man here, Specialist," he said. His voice carried the weight of honesty, stripped bare of rank or command. "That was the cleanest shot I've ever seen." Sarah gave a small nod. "Just did what had to be done, Sergeant." But Miller shook his head. "No, you did more. Than that, you did the impossible." The march back to base was different. The squad moved lighter, their steps quicker, spirits higher. Where fear had gnawed at them, now they carried relief, even exhilaration. Jenkins, once doubting, kept stealing glances at Sarah, as if still trying to reconcile what he'd seen. Martinez, on the other hand, had no such hesitation. He walked beside her, grinning ear to ear. "Whitfield, I swear, I'm telling this story until I'm old and gray. My grandkids are going to know you by name." Sarah allowed herself a small smile at last. Not wide, not boastful, just enough to show she'd heard him. Because deep down, she knew the story wouldn't need help spreading. Stories like that had a way of traveling on their own. When they reached the outpost, the word had already started to circulate. Whispers carried faster than radio waves in. A place like that. By the time Sarah set her rifle down, soldiers were glancing her way, conversations pausing as she passed. Some nodded respectfully. Others looked at her with open disbelief. But all of them recognized the same thing. She had done what few could even dream of doing. She had silenced the sniper. That night, sitting under the dim glow of a lantern, Sarah finally let the weight of it sink in. The adrenaline had faded, leaving her tired but restless. She replayed the shot in her mind, the way the world had slowed, the way certainty had filled her chest. It hadn't been luck. It hadn't been chance. It had been skill, patience, and belief in herself. When others had doubted, her father's voice came back to her once more. "Don't just look, see." She smiled faintly. She had seen. And because of that, her squad was alive. The story of that shot didn't end with her squad. By dawn the next day, it was already traveling. Between outposts, whispered across radios, retold in mess tents. Soldiers who had never met Sarah spoke her name with awe. They laughed at her rifle, the story went. But then she hit a sniper shot no one thought possible. And though Sarah didn't see glory, she knew one thing for certain. That shot had changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone who would hear the story. The valley had fallen silent when her rifle spoke, and in that silence, her legend was born. By sunrise, the outpost was alive with whispers. Stories spread quickly in war zones, faster than official reports, faster than radio chatter. Soldiers leaned across tables in the mess tent, voices low but eager, repeating what they had heard. They said it was one shot, just one, from the riverbed all the way to the ridge. Impossible distance, nailed him clean. Every telling grew sharper, more dramatic. Some swore she had taken the shot without even flinching. Others claimed she had called her target before squeezing the trigger. Each soldier who heard it added their own embellishment, but the truth didn't need exaggeration. The truth was already extraordinary. Sarah Whitfield's name was on every lip, her rifle shot already transforming into legend. But Sarah herself didn't feel like a legend. She sat on her bunk in the dim barracks, rifle disassembled in her lap, hands moving with practiced care as she cleaned each part. It was a ritual, as much as a necessity. A way to ground herself, to push away the noise. She hadn't fired for glory. She hadn't fired to be remembered. She had fired because she had no other choice, because if she hadn't, her squad would be dead. And yet, here she was, the focus of a story racing ahead of her. Martinez plopped down on the bunk across from her, grinning as usual. "You hear the new version?" Word is you hit him blindfolded at 1.5 miles. Sarah gave him a look, half amused, half exasperated. "Blindfolded, huh? Swear to God, some private told me over chow. Said you didn't even look." Through the scope, she shook her head, smirking faintly. "People will say anything to make a story sound better." Martinez leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His grin softened into something more serious. "Doesn't matter what they say. What matters is we were there. We know the truth. And the truth is, you saved us." For the first time, Sarah allowed herself a small smile, not of pride, but of quiet acknowledgement. "I did what anyone should have done." Martinez shook his head firmly. "No, Whitfield. Not anyone could have made that shot. Only you." Recognition came quickly. The squad's after-action report carried weight. Backed by Miller's blunt testimony, Specialist Sarah Whitfield neutralized an enemy sniper at extreme range, preventing further casualties. Her actions directly saved the lives of her squad. The report traveled upward, higher and higher, until officers who had never heard her name were suddenly discussing her. Commendations were suggested, citations drafted. And though Sarah didn't seek the spotlight, it found her anyway. In the days that followed, Sarah noticed the shift in how others treated her. Soldiers who had once chuckled at her small frame, who had doubted her skill with a rifle, now nodded respectfully when she passed. Even Jenkins, the loudest of her doubters, couldn't hide the way he looked at her differently. One evening, as the squad gathered around a small fire for warmth, Jenkins finally spoke up. His voice was awkward, halting. "Listen, Whitfield, I was wrong. About you. About everything." The squad went quiet. Sarah looked at him steadily, waiting. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes dropping to the dirt. "You proved me wrong, and I'm damn glad you did. If you hadn't been here, I wouldn't be." It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't polished, but it was real. And for Sarah, that was enough. Miller, too, treated her differently. He had always been a hard, unyielding leader, sparing little praise. But after the shot, his tone shifted. His orders still came crisp, but when he looked at Sarah, there was a glimmer of respect that hadn't been there before. One night, he approached her quietly after a patrol. "Whitfield," he said. "Sergeant?" He studied her for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke. "You remind me of a sniper I served with years ago. Best shot I ever saw, but even he never pulled off something like that." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat, though she kept her expression calm. "I just did what needed to be done." Miller gave a faint, rare smile. "And that's what makes you dangerous to them, and an asset to us." The story of the shot refused to die. It spread beyond their unit, beyond their outpost, whispered along convoys, carried into briefing rooms. Each retelling added fuel to the growing legend. The young specialist, underestimated and dismissed, who silenced a sniper with a single impossible shot. Soldiers she had never met approached her with quiet respect. Some asked if the story was true. Others didn't bother. Asking they already believed. Sarah answered simply each time, "I did my job." But deep inside, she knew it was more than that. Weeks later, a letter arrived from home. Her father's handwriting, sprawled across the envelope, familiar and steady. She opened it under the pale light of her bunk lamp, eyes scanning the words. Your mother and I heard about what you did. Word travels faster than you'd think. I can't say I'm surprised. You always had the patience to wait for the right moment. Always saw more than the rest of us. I'm proud of you, Sarah. Not for the shot, but for proving to yourself who you are. She sat quietly after reading, the letter resting in her lap. His words weighed more than any metal ever could. In time, she knew the war would move on. New missions would come, new stories would replace old ones. But the shot, the one impossible moment that had saved her squad, would live on. It would be told and retold, passed down like all soldiers' tales, part fact, part legend, but always remembered. And in that story, Sarah Whitfield would never again be the girl they laughed at. She would be the soldier who had done the impossible. On her next deployment, months later, she overheard two younger soldiers whispering as she passed. That's her, one said. That's Whitfield. The sniper shot. No way. That was her? Yeah. Believe me, it was her. Sarah smiled faintly to herself, not turning around, not correcting them. Let them talk. Let the story grow. Because she knew the truth. In that valley, on that day, she had carried not just a rifle, but the weight of every doubt, every laugh, every sneer ever thrown her way. And with one squeeze of the trigger, she had silenced them all. The legacy of a single shot wasn't the fame or the whispers or the nods of respect. It was the proof that when the moment came, she had stood unshaken. She had seen what others missed. She had trusted herself when no one else did. That was the true story. The rest was just noise. And in the quiet moments, when she thought back to that impossible shot, she remembered the silence after the echo faded, the silence of survival, of lives saved, the silence that would follow her forever.